This is Capsule on liveinlimbo.com. My name is Sean Chen.
I am Andreas Babiolakis. This is an adventure to music, film, and pop culture.
How's it going, Andreas?
Pretty good, pretty good. Same thing as last time. I've just gotten up, but I'm ready to go right into this massive arrangement of words that I do at the end of each year, but only the second section of it out of four. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. How about you?
Pretty good too. Things are winding down here at Live in Limbo for the new year, so everything's good. And we have our best of list from you, of course, which is great. We always love those.
Well, I hope so. I never know how these things are going to go. I know it's a bit of a narcissistic project where I take on a lot of this by myself, but I try and put in as much work into it as possible so it's at least worth it. So I hope it's been delivered this year.
Yes. Last week we talked about, and you published the or the top 25 songs of 2015. And today we will run through the top 25 albums. I apologize. I'm stuffy right now. I think I might have a cold, but I will survive, hopefully, into the new year. All
Yeah,
right.
no, you should be fine. We're in an age where you're not gonna die on the way to Oregon in your carriage, right? So I think you'll be okay.
You could still. It's possible.
Well, no, you can go to a hospital a lot more easily.
Yeah. All right. So, Andreas, we're going to do the same thing like we did last week. We'll run through 25 until 11, and then we'll go in depth into 10 to 1.
Sounds good to me. So, yeah, as you noticed with the songs, with the albums as well, there will be a lot of female rock oriented groups or solo projects here, but at the same time, we also have a lot of personal political albums that made this list that are quite current with the times, and we also have a lot of artists who either had a more easier sound, a little bit more mainstream in tone, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's why they made this list. Or we just have groups from way back when, a lot of 90s acts that have come back with a vengeance. So, yeah, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so here we go. Let's start off with number 25. Number 25, we have the 90s throwback alternate rock group Speedy Ortiz with their album Foiled Deer. Number 24, we have folk harpist Joanna Newsom with her poppiest album, Divers, which is still a great album.
Sarah Ricks did a review on her show in Toronto. Check that out in the show notes.
Yeah, from what I know, there wasn't a lot of media, so this is quite a rare gem. So absolutely check it out. Also, check out number 23. We have Dr. Dre's eventual third album and his final album, Compton.
Which is one of my favorites of the year.
Oh, yeah, we're going to go into
Yeah,
yours
I'll talk
at one
about mine
point.
later. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Number 2, we have.
22.
Oh, yeah, no, we haven't jumped that quickly.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was
No.
fast.
Number 2 of 20. No. Number number 22, we have the Mouthful Waxahachie's album, Ivy Trip. Number 1, we have indie rock group Deer Hunter's album, Fading Frontier.
21. You keep saying you jumped like minus 20.
Did I say number 1?
Yeah.
Number 21. That's the last time I'm going to make that mistake. Number 21 is indie rock group Deer Hunter's Fading Frontier. Number 20.
Okay, you didn't say zero. You didn't say zero.
Exactly.
That's good.
Number 20 is 90s all-girl group Sleater Kitties Return, No Cities to Love. Number 19 is supercharged R&B rocker Miguel's album, Wild Heart. Number 18 is indie band gone Sith rock Tame Impala's Currents. Number 17 is emotional hip-hop artist Earl Sweatshirt's I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, an album by Earl Sweatshirt. I'm surprised that's not by me. Number 16 is indie crooner Lana Del Rey's Honeymoon. Number 15 is this year's biggest breakthrough, Courtney Barnett, with her album Sometimes I Sit and Think, Sometimes I Just Sit. Number 14 is all over the board in metal Death Heaven with their third album, New Bermuda. Number 13 is eccentric folk rock singer Father John Misty with his twisted love tale, I Love You, Honey Bear. Number 12 is Animal Collective member Panda Bear with his confrontational poppy album, Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper. And number 11, we finally get to with Canadian Noise Orchestra, Godspeed You, Black Emperor, with their one song cut up into four segments, Asunder, Sweet, Another Distress.
So that's a great top 11 to 25. Was I asked you last week, but maybe you want to re-say it here. Was this year a great year in terms of albums, not songs, but albums? A strong year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I had
Better than last
over
year?
yes,
Okay.
I will say that with emphasis. This year was a lot harder to organize, and I had over 20 that I had to cut for sure, and
Wow.
a lot of them were strong contenders and not just necessarily fluff that I was just writing to jog my mind. And it's unfortunate because I want to shout out an honorable mention actually, because this happens every year, where you'll see this with this year. I had to include an album that came out too late last year because it was too good not to mention.
And then
This
that bumps
album,
someone else out.
eh, yeah, but this year, I wouldn't say the album is as good, but it's definitely worthy of being on like my top 15 maybe. It's Baroness's Purple, which just came out a few days ago, and it's one of the better, heavier releases I've heard this year. I mean, it's quite something, and it's unfortunate that I couldn't include it.
Which one was that?
Baroness's Purple.
Ah, yes. Very good.
Yes, no, Baroness are a sludge metal band with progressive elements from the States, and it's their fourth album. They're all color themed. Like they started off as red album, blue record, then yellow and green, which is a double disc. They got into a massive accident which left the band almost dead, so two of the members had to leave and they replaced them.
Wow.
And Purple's their comeback album with a lot of really personal writing and touching moments in it. Like it's quite something. It's quite emotional. So no, it's terrific, and I'm sad that I couldn't have included it. Even James Hetfield from Metallica said it was one of the best things outside of music as well
What
that he
about
experienced in 2015.
what about like with like artists that release stuff like this week, like Prince did?
Well, the Prince album was all right. I mean, that's not something that I was.
Oh, it wouldn't have made it anyways.
No,
Oh, sorry, Prince.
Prince's best days were back in the 80s and early 90s, but the way you could look at his newer music is an appreciation for the fact that he's still putting stuff out. That's what I
Yeah,
would say about that.
but like 2 weeks before the new year. I guess he doesn't really care.
It's Prince. He
Yeah, he can do
releases
whatever
one
he
of his
wants.
albums almost every year. Yeah, he's quite prolific. I don't think he cares about release dates.
And damn you for snubbing us at Messy Hall again. 5 hours. Okay. Anyways, you got
Yeah,
since I have a stuffy nose, I can't do the sound effect. Do you want to do the top 10 thing?
sure. If we're ready to go into it, I
Let's do
guess.
it, man.
Okay, number 10, 10, 10. That's the only time I'm going to do that.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
I'll be serious.
they get the idea.
Number 10, we have American turned Canadian indie artist US Girls with Half Free. And I went into this last week, but US Girls and this album were some of the most underappreciated aspects of music of this year. And I'll say that again.
Would you say underrated as well?
Yes,
In both
absolutely.
in both ways. Yeah, I actually listened to this album after you told me about it, and we looked through it, and then Neil took photos of her show, which you kind of wanted to go to, but it was like at some random weird hour at midnight. But anyways, yes, I do really like this album. It's very low key, I would say. I would say it's kind of like even lower key than Courtney Barnett.
Well, Courtney Barnett's not quite low key
I know
herself, I would
she's
say.
not low key, but like not at the level of attention where she deserves to be. You know what I'm saying?
Kind of like minimalist.
No, kind of like Carly Rae Jepsen.
Oh, in terms of okay,
In
I
terms
think
of recognition, like from the mainstream.
okay, I thought I meant like musically.
No,
No,
no, no.
no, of course, no. U.S. Girls is only kind of making it now, but she's had a few albums before this.
Yes. So still,
Uh,
like, even though it's been a few albums, it's still she's not like at critical mass
I
by
think
far.
she'll get close though. I think she might not be at St. Vincent's level anytime soon, but I think she has the capabilities of getting there, and I for sure think that if she continues this pace, U.S. Girls, which is Meg Ramey, like that's her birth
She
name.
lives in Toronto. We could
Yeah, she
find
lives in
her.
Toronto. Yes. Well, I'm not a stalkery kind of person, Sean. No,
Okay.
but I think she has the capability of making festivals and making it quite high on festival lists if she keeps going this direction.
So why did you love this album half free?
It's got so many ideas in it, but it's still quite signature. It's got, like random rock guitars being tossed into the mix where it's confusing but comforting at the same time. You have a huge 60s aspect of it where it goes from like the vocals to the shoddy production, which is purposefully shoddy. It sounds like it's being played on a transmitter, but then at the same time it's also very crisp in its rhythm and its bass. It's a huge mixture of 60s, and it jumps right into the 90s and now. Like it's a lot of different poppy elements shoved into one, but at the same time, like the lyrics sometimes don't really match with that. Like they might contrast it. They talk about her views on life, her sorrows. That skit in the middle where she describes this weird dream where her father has like naked pictures of her as a child, but she's like, I was hot stuff, and uh, the whole punchline is, um, there is such thing as like a complex between uh fathers and sons and fathers and daughters, but in the end sons will never have the self-esteem issues that girls have, and it went from like a weird dream that made no sense to being something we can all identify with if we're female or not. And that was just like the phone skits. You can imagine what each actual song can entail.
Absolutely. All right. That's a great album. And number 9.
Number 9, we have Vince Staples, who has been featured on a lot of songs, but this is basically his first introduction to the world of what he could do with an album. With Summertime '06, I think that's how you would pronounce that. Um, it's oddly enough a double disc because it's not even an hour long, but it makes sense when you put it into perspective because of how each mini album, let's say, would play off. And it's quite something. It's quite all over the board. It talks about his personal stories or the stories that he conjures up from his time during that period of summertime of 2006, and just the things he was being introduced to in the world from his youth, and his want to be shallow and into like typical youthful things, but then he's busy seeing a lot of these new things in life that are greatly affecting him, like how does he continue his life? Where does he go from here? What does it mean? Like, is he going to continue being in such a state where he has to rely on a criminal activity to keep going? It's typical in hip hop themes, but it's quite personal because it comes from a place of truth.
Absolutely. Number 8. This one I kind of liked as well, but you put 2 albums by the same artist. Does the So this is Beach House, Depression Cherry, and also Thank Your Lucky Stars. Would you
Yeah,
would
and
you say they go together though? That's why they can be ranked together?
I wouldn't say that they go together. They are very different albums, even though they're Beach House, and a lot
So
of
technically
people
we have 26 albums.
kind of. Yeah, technically we got away with that, I'm guessing. The thing is, I just didn't know which one to rank above the other, and I thought they were both excellent. And Depression Cherry is a lot louder, but minimalist as well. It's got a lot of droning to it. It's got a lot of effects. It's probably the most shoegaze sounding album that they've ever released.
Yeah.
Um, it's but it's not even fully shoegaze though. It just has a lot of reverb and it kind of feels like it soars with its person, even though it's stripped down as well. It's different in that way. But then you have Thank Your Lucky Stars, which is a little bit more stripped down as well, but it's a lot indie sounding and a lot more personal with its lyricism. Like it's from a place I've heard a lot of it. Well, so does Depression Cherry and a lot of Beach House, but basically it just felt like they discovered different or they uncovered different avenues of what makes Beach House great, but strictly in their own right.
Amazing. So, do you know if they recorded like all these songs at one time period and then they were like, oh, let's just split them up into two different themes?
Well, it's confusing because they were off for 3 years, which is atypical to them because they usually release an album every 2 years. So then Depression Cherry had a bit of a promotional release. It had a single. It had all of this hype built around it, and it finally got released. They were saying we don't want cover art. We want it to be like a felty cover, so we're describing our music with a texture instead of an image. Like they went into all of this, but then weirdly enough, like 2 months later, they said we've got new music we're being released that's being released in a week, and this is us doing this. We've had some restrictions, but this is us releasing this the way that we want to. And, it kind of just came out the week afterwards. And that was it. So it wasn't nearly as hyped or anything. It just kind of got dropped.
Awesome. Yes. So, let's go on to the next one. Number 7. I don't know anything about this artist. So, tell me about it.
One of Tricks Point Never is a project by Daniel
Say it again.
Lopatin. One of Tricks Point Never.
Okay. One oh tricks point. No, never. Okay. Great. Yes.
Yes, he's one of my favorite producers or electronic artists at the moment right now. He's got a lot of very different ideas that really challenge what you could do with electronic music, but not just electronic music, but the clipping and piecing together of it. His music usually sounds either quite lush or in the case of the example I provided, his best album, Replica, it's purposefully sounds like it's being spliced and repeated and clipped together. But that's somewhat of what the charm is. Garden of Delete is my second favorite album of his after Replica, but I think it's his finest example of what he could do with piecing sounds together and purposefully making it sound like sounds drop at this very instant. This part just chimes in whenever it feels like it. He truly experiments what you can do with piecing tracks together and yeah, I mean to make more sense of it, you've got to listen to it yourself.
I have to because you ranked it number 7. That's like really, really high up there. This must be like some revolutionary music.
Well, don't just take my word for it. Like a lot of people have put Garden of Delete on their lists, and rightfully so, because it's
Like I've never even heard of him before. That's good. I like when I learn new things.
well, he's done quite a bit. Like he was at NXNE last year. He replaced Death Grips when Nine Inch Nails and Soundgarden toured. He's done quite a bit, and his
Okay.
albums have been recognized before. He's definitely worth checking out if you're into any sort of electronic instrumental ambient music.
Awesome. Yes.
This album's this album, just to try and sell it a little bit more, because each of his albums has a very different sound. This doesn't sound like typical One of Trick's albums. This one actually sounds very influenced by Nine Inch Nails at points, where it gets kind of intense and industrial sounding, but then it goes straight back into being clippy, glitchy ambient music. There's a lot to it.
Sounds good. I will listen to that. I just added his album to Apple Music playlists.
Perfect. Well, I
Cool.
hope you enjoy it.
Number 6. This one I like a lot. This is Art Angels by Grimes.
Yes, no, everybody's liking this one a lot. It actually ranked third on Pitchfork's album of the year list. So I'm
Whoa.
glad to see that. I'm glad to see that this album that Grimes was, I feel like maybe she wasn't scared of putting it out, but she got a lot of backlash with her release of her pop single last year, Go. And this album is straight up punk from all, or not punk, pop from all quarters of the world with rock elements, punk elements, but it's mostly straight up pop, and it's English pop, it's Asian pop, whether it be J, K, or C. It's pop from over here. It's everything pop, and that's what the world is afraid of. But look at this result. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. It's well produced, and she's setting herself in the industry as not just a singer, but a writer, a producer. She's many threats in one, including her concerts and her presence and her image. She's really killing it and redefining what it means to be a pop artist now. And I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that actually didn't like this album, even though a lot of people might have been afraid of it because it wasn't as eerie and suspenseful as Visions, But Art Angels might actually be better as a
Not
whole.
not also not just artist, but like producer as well. I think that's like a key point.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and listen to the production on this album. It's arguably some of the best of this year.
So
Like,
when last year, or when we saw her at Time Festival in Toronto, that's when she released Go, and then is this the album that she put on hold?
no, I think she fully
Like, was
abandoned
Go
whatever.
supposed to be its own album? Like, was there supposed to be an album that goes with Go?
Yes, I believe
And she
so. Unless
scrapped
I'm
that one.
yes,
But I
this
like
is this is
Go.
well when she released Reality. I think it was last year, which ended up on this album. Even that got kind of changed. Like it's got a different sound to it to match this album. So obviously she might have tried to do the same thing with Go, but she abandoned it because it didn't fit the album. But whatever she did, I mean, this album works.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yep. So number 5, we have Björk's album Volnakura. Which, have you had a chance to listen to this?
Yes, I did. And actually, what's that song? The crazy mouth stuff. What's that?
Mouth Mantra.
Yeah, Mouth Mantra. Yeah. That was our song of the day earlier this week. She released a video and it was like crazy, like mouth
Yeah,
graphics.
one of the videos of the year, I'm
In
sure.
going into an adventure into Bjork's mouth.
Yeah, and she's not one who's short of having creative music videos, of course. But Volnakura is easily the best album she's released in
Ever?
over 10 years. No,
No.
but if I were to seriously sit down and think about it, it might be in her top 5 for me.
That's good.
I might go Homogenic, Medulla, Vespertine, Post, Volnakura. I think that would make sense.
But like as you were saying before, she's like in the ranks of veteran, like Prince level, kind of almost there. But like she's still making albums that can make it into your top 10, but not just your top 10, but now top 5.
Well, she might be the like on Prince's level for our kind of scene, like the indie scene, or those who branch out of just like the mainstream confinements of what things could be like. She's avant-garde pop and not
Yeah.
just straight up pop. Like, you're not going to find her on the radio anytime soon. Back in the 90s maybe, but she still has a legacy behind her, and she's always trying to push the boundaries. Even with some of her albums which didn't work out as well, like Biophilia, which was still, I still consider it quite a good release. Um, that was like the first iPad album where you could explore each song through it. It had this crazy live show with like Tesla coils and this pendulum that ran back and forth according to the Earth's gravitational pull, while it plucked strings according to what the Earth would dictate it to pluck. Like some really crazy inventive things. And then Volnakura is her trying to be inventive with what it feels like to be heartbroken after years and years of being with somebody that you loved unconditionally. And it's divided into 3 parts. It's the want to make this work, the actual split up, and what it meant to her life and her children, or her child rather. She's only got one, I believe.
Yeah.
And then finally, like, her moving on and trying to relive again. And it's really powerful stuff. I think it's her longest album because it's just under an hour, because she usually doesn't have albums that long. And it it's all worth it. It fully dives into so many personal things, and all of it is candid. Like, she talks about like the funeral of her family, not because they died, but because the concept of family has been split apart, and it'll never be pieced back together because of this divorce. And she even goes into like intimate details where it's like the last time they ever kissed or last time they ever had sex. It dictates all of the history behind it and how loaded it was and how underappreciated it was because they didn't know it would be the last time. But
That is a scary
now,
thought.
yeah, it is. It's you couldn't put it past Bjork to be confrontational and personal. I mean, she's had some awkward lyrics in the past because she's being so confrontational, but here, like, it's only awkward because splitting up and heartbreak is awkward, and the whole thing is just a very personal, depressing album that has its moments of triumph where you can see Bjork finally being able to move on, and it's just sensational. I remember the first time it actually got leaked 2 months before its release. It I remember it being good, but the more I listened to it, the more I said, "Okay, I'm not just getting this because I own every Bjork album, as she's probably one of my all-time favorite artists, but I need this because this is something that's slowly becoming something I can't even truly define when it comes to her discography, and I haven't had a chance to do that in a while. It's really something else, and it's an artist taking a negative and turning it into one of her best albums that she's put out in ages.
Absolutely. You need to see her live.
Yes, I do, and I'm dying to see her live. That's on my bucket
Well,
list,
hopefully
100%.
hopefully she comes to Toronto next year.
Yeah, it's too bad I've already missed out on David Bowie because he's put up, you know, he's retired from touring, so that's never gonna happen. So I can't let that happen with Bjork. I need
No,
to see her.
absolutely. Number 4 is another album that I really liked. Jamie XX In Color.
Yeah, I kind of like the XX. I'm not the biggest fan of theirs, and when I heard that one of the members was releasing, like a straight up electronic album which contains techno, house, all sorts of like mainstream aspects, I I wasn't hesitant, but I was kind of thinking, okay, sure, whatever.
Like, do
But
you
then I
think the
kept
music industry was surprised or did not
maybe
expect it to be
may
that good?
I don't know because I sure didn't. I wasn't expecting bad things, but I kind of wasn't interested until everybody was raving about it. So maybe it did catch him by surprise. I'm not sure, but you know, once this isn't an album that takes time to get. Once you sit down and you actually put it on, you'll understand immediately what everybody's talking about. This, it's hard to say because so many albums this year had terrific production, but we had Compton had some great production, Art Angels, To Pimp a Butterfly, but this might be my favorite production of the year. I mean, it's so layered and the bass is so thick and it's the size of the murals created by the music here. It's so difficult to put a label on it. It's really something else. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, please do because this is a great example of music that's accessible enough for everybody, but it's so textured that you'll discover new corridors each and every single time you listen to it. And if you're like me and you're not a big fan of the XX, or you're kind of thinking, "Oh, okay, this is his electronic venture, whatever." No, don't be stupid. Please listen to this and let me know what you think because if you haven't heard it already, because at this point you probably have, as has the rest of the world. But if you still have put it off for those benign reasons, like I did, you are severely missing out on
Make it a
one
New
of the
Year's
best
resolution.
surprises. Yeah, you're missing out on one of the
You
biggest
know,
surprises of the year.
you know what I learned though, that there's actually different genres of EDM or electronic music because Dakota and I went to the Mad Decent block party in Toronto, and then we were just talking with like fans and stuff, and a lot of them didn't know who Jamie XX was.
Yeah, no,
So
it's like
there,
any genre.
yeah, Jamie is like hipster EDM.
Well, I don't know if I'd say that, but um,
Like, but you know, like the type of artists that play at a mad decent block party versus like Jamie XX. They're both like EDM, but they're like different.
they're very different, though. I mean, you can't. This is why so many genres have, yeah, so many musical genres have so many subgenres because you can't say electronic dance music and then piece Skrillex and Jimmy XX together. They're
Yeah.
still extremely different. And no, whatever you would consider, you know, Jimmy XX and In Color, it's terrific. That's all I'm going to label it as.
Yes. Number three is also a big one.
Number three was the album I was referring to earlier. It came out December 15th, 2014, but I'm not the only one who included it in this year's list. Rolling Stone did, Pitchfork did, and it's because it was quite a 2015 album. We just got it a bit sooner than 2015.
It was
It's the
forward
return.
thinking.
Exactly. It's the return of the great R&B funk musician D'Angelo with his group, the Vanguard, Black Messiah. Now, this album was again an album that was too good to ignore, and when it came out too late at the end of last year, everybody was itching to try and rewrite their list and include it because this is proof that D'Angelo has done no wrong with the three albums he's put out now. And no, Black Messiah is vicious. It's in your face. It's very appropriate for the times, whether it be about political issues, like what's been going on in America or even in the entire world lately. A lot of like the cop brutality. But then there's also a lot of like modern sexuality, modern thinking of love and emotional connections. There's a lot of stuff going on here, as per any D'Angelo release. But for somebody who's been away for over 10 years and almost been out of the public eye for just as long, it's quite a comeback and a very necessary one. Have you had a chance to listen to it?
Yeah, I listened to the full thing like when Dakota and you were raving about it last year. It was really good. I really wish that he came to a Canadian festival.
Well, the thing is, he's quite introverted now because he used to be the kind of person who would be all over the place, but
Yeah.
then the public eye kind of it shattered his confidence, I guess. And
Really? Oh, that's unfortunate.
yeah, because he was kind of being pushed as like this muscular sex god, and
Now he
I don't
wears a
know.
poncho and hat.
Well, I don't
It,
know. Like I don't blame him for wanting to retreat because I'd want it to be about the music, not about that. And even in one of the songs on this album, he basically has a lyric that says, "Do you care about the state that I'm in, or the state of my abdomen? Is well, like what's more important?" And
the ladies will
well,
say abdomen.
but anybody who truly knows what D'Angelo is special
Yeah,
for would say like his music and his well being, of course.
absolutely.
Number two is quite an equally current album, both politically about self adventure and discovery, sexuality, and just overall culture. We have Kendrick Lamar's ambitious opus to Pimp a Butterfly, which I'll get into reasons why it's not my number
Yeah, I
one
was
once
gonna
we
say,
get
how
to.
come this is not your number one?
We'll
I
get
love
there
this
when we
album
get
too.
there. No, this album is. If I could have made a tied number one,
Oh,
I might have, but first of all, it wouldn't be right. It'd be cheating my readers out or anybody who would be checking out this list. It'd be cheating them out because you don't read a list and see, oh, we have a tied number one. It needs to be a number one.
that's a cop out.
But
Yeah.
yeah, let me tell you this at my number one album, I was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth the entire year thinking, why is this one better? Why is that one better?
Like,
And
how
it was
close was
literally
it?
maybe
Like a point one difference?
Well, I actually rated them the exact same thing, but
Oh,
when I was going back and forth, I'd say I only had a final decision maybe a month ago.
and was
Ever
this like
since
something you're
March.
like sleeping and then you wake up as like, I got it?
No, I think I just put on the number one album and I said, and I had some discussions to myself, but we'll get there when we get to
Yeah.
the number one. Let's focus on this album right now because this has topped most lists. It's probably going to sweep the Grammys, and rightfully so. To Pimp a Butterfly is one of the most revolutionary albums we've had of any genre in years. It's it's both it's so many things at once. It's a straight up story of Kendrick revisiting his roots, going from like this rock star lifestyle to this rediscovering his culture. It's this massive sphere of themes that are diving into one another, kind of like you had like a snow globe and you've shaken it up, and everything is colliding into one another. It's this deduction of this poem that he reads to Tupac at the end of the album, where you see line by line, all of the effect and the impact that each part of his history had in each line and why he wrote this poem. So it's a story, but it's also him reading the poem and you're analyzing each line. So it's a very stationary piece. It's this big Ouroboros that's circling in on itself, while each song could fall into one another via like a wormhole.
Yeah.
It's so many different things at once. It's a universe. It's hard to describe what this album is because it's so many damn things at once. It says so many different things at once. There's just so much creativity behind it. It's absolutely insane how ambitious this is. I don't think we've seen ambition this high in years, and I don't think we will for a very long time until Kendrick Lamar puts out his next album.
I
I'm guessing.
agree in that this is like one of the most complex and beautiful albums, not like a straightforward pop album that's been very critically acclaimed and also gets recognition from places like the Grammys. I think he's leading with like 11 nominations for the 58th Grammys next year.
As he should. I mean, with Good Kid, Mad City, he had a straightforward story, which was cinematic, and that alone was quite a feat. I mean, that alone was terrific. But then you look at this, and you'd think, okay, maybe he's gonna have another storyline. Maybe he's going to do something similar while he's older, or like what's going to happen next. No, this is just so many things at once that you don't even know where he's going to go from here. I mean, this is unreal what he's pieced together. I remember the very first time I had a chance to actually put on this album. I was actually on my way to work and I put it on my phone after ripping it onto my computer. And I was on the way to work, and it takes me about 2 hours to get to work. And once I got into work, I felt like somebody had knocked me in the face, and I was like revisiting my repercussions and feeling the whiplash that I got and just how blown away I was. And at that point I still wasn't even sure what I really heard because it was just so many things at once. But whatever it was, I knew I needed to listen to it again. It was an experience I don't have a lot with music anymore because a lot of the time I'll look at an album and say, okay, this is great. This is actually really good, but I won't feel like anything's being invented.
Yeah.
This album, on the other hand, no, it's
He invented something.
yes. And if you haven't listened to this one yet, like just stop listening to this. Just go listen to it now,
Yeah.
basically.
So according to this, then he should technically win the Grammys because the nominees for the album of the year are Alabama Shakes, Kendrick Lamar, Chris Stapleton, Taylor Swift, and The Weeknd, and none of the other ones made your list. So technically, he should win theoretically.
Well, if you look at how many album of the year lists he's topped, never mind be featured in, topped, I think actually what our associate editor Dakota Arsenault showed me this the other day. It was like obviously the most lists, but my album of the year winner ended up topping one other list. Courtney Barnett ended up topping maybe like two or three. Kendrick Lamar was like over 30, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Like he swept every one of these lists away, and everybody's in agreement that this album is something else. Like he topped Rolling Stone's list.
That
He
would be
topped.
the popular vote then. But then money wise and commercially, probably Taylor Swift.
She's not going to beat him though. I can guarantee that.
How
This
was
is
her album nominated though? Wasn't that released in 2014?
well, the Grammys are a bit
Oh
iffy
yeah.
because I think it's each November that the year restarts for them, or it's something like that. Like they have a big window, or a weirdly timed window, I would say. But nonetheless, it topped Pitchfork's list as well, which is the first time I believe actually that any artist has topped their list twice
Wow.
for album of the year, and they also placed this song all right as the song of the year. So you know he's topped so many lists, and quite strongly so that if the Grammys didn't make him win, then it would be an absolute sham. Now, let me stop promoting this and go into my number one album before I make it not feel like a number one album anymore. But
Awesome.
before we do that, did you want to go into yours like we did
Yes,
last
I
time?
really liked. So my top three, number three would be Dr. Dre's Compton, and that was your number 23.
It's what I was doing earlier. I
You were
was just
predicting.
yeah, I was getting ready for you. That's why I did that.
But like, I don't know. Like when you think about it though, it's like this is Dr. Dre, like potentially, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be his last one unless he gets like, isn't there going to be a Compton 2? Anyways, but anyways, so this
No,
one is like his his end story. Like he went from nothing to forming a company, then getting bought out by the biggest company, and he's like the first billionaire rapper. And he's like reflecting back on his life, and it's a solid album with solid contributions from other big name artists like Kendrick Lamar and Eminem, and like this must be in the top 10.
for you it is.
Okay, well that's cool. My number two is actually Florence and the Machine. How big, how blue, how beautiful. I think she's come a long way, and she represents like a lot of where the females are going this year. So it's like when we were talking about like underrated artists like Courtney Barnett and so I and US girls. So I kind of imagine them on like a track to Florence's level almost. Like she
Yes.
headlined Glastonbury and Festival here in Toronto. So I kind of see it like Florence is she broke through the ceiling, she's there. Then you have Saint Vincent, who's like mainstream, she's there. She's like in commercials for Sonos and stuff like that. Then you have like Courtney Barnett, still kind of underrated, but on that same level, gonna get there. And then US Girls is under her, going there, getting there. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
absolutely. Yeah, no, and I'm not the biggest fan of Florence and the Machine, but that album was actually in my long list. I think it was quite a solid effort. So yeah, no, I do agree that it is a noticeable album of this year.
And believe this or not, my number one album is Drake.
There's nothing wrong with that. That if you're reading this, it's too late.
Yeah, no.
Was actually on my long list as well. With despite the fact that I used to be very vocal about my distaste in Drake, but unfortunately, I think 2015 has made me love the devil himself. So
Ooh.
yeah, I might like quite a bit of Drake, unfortunately. But
I just like his message and the sound he gives off and his videos. Like he's like the whole package, and he represents Toronto, and like he's at the top of his game. People are trying to take him down, but he won't give in, and he's just gonna feel like he has no creative restraints anymore.
well, what Pitchfork was saying was To Pimp a Butterfly was a big reason why Kanye West didn't release an album this year and why Drake didn't release a full length this year, only a mixtape. So
Oh,
that
really?
might make
Wow,
sense. But, despite that, Drake's mixtape was actually probably my favorite thing he's ever done. So at least there's that, right?
that's really cool. Yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't know that was a reason.
It's theoretical. It's not set in stone,
Theoretically,
but
yeah,
you can definitely predict that that could be why.
yeah.
But let's go into my number one because we got to wrap things up, and I need to talk about this one and why I put it over what I consider an instant hip hop classic, "To Pimp a Butterfly." We
Number
have.
one.
Oh, I thought you were too sick to do that, but
I just
yes.
did it for you.
Thank you for the commitment, for such an honor. We have Sufjan Stevens, Carrie, and Lowell.
How did this beat Kendrick?
When I was trying to go over it back and forth, the last month or so, I realized I put on Carrie and Lowell more. I had such an emotional connection to Carrie and Lowell more. What what Kendrick Lamar did with Ambition, Sufjan Stevens did with stripping things down. Usually he has like hour and a half long albums that are huge in orchestration, or they sprawl off the beaten paths by venturing into like electronic music as he did with Age of Odds, or all this storytelling about America as he did with like two of his US albums, state albums. um, but with Carrie and Lowell, he faced a tragedy as well, whereas Bjork was dealing with a split partnership. Sufjan Stevens was dealing with the death of his mother. And it's not just the death of his mother. Like, if you listen to Carrie and Lowell, it is so many pictures that were taken. You're looking at images on each and every single one of these songs, and you're seeing some of the most heartbreaking imagery in recent music, or some of the music you might ever hear. When a lot of artists try to make depressing music, I feel their side of things, but a lot of the times I don't feel connected, except for like the rare exception of, like Joni Mitchell's Blue, which is iconic at being one of the greatest depressing albums that there are. But Carrie and Lowell is unlike any album I've heard in terms of getting that emotional connection to me. To me, it does what Sun Kill Moon tried to do last year with their album, which was still great and well written and very much based on a train of thought. But Carrie and Lowell was something else. Before I continue, have you had a chance to listen to it?
Yeah, I did. I liked it a lot, but I wouldn't call it my number one. But that's cool too.
Well, a lot of people wouldn't, but there are some of us that felt very strongly about this album, actually, enough to call it our number ones. And it's definitely, even though it's not iconically Sufjan Stevens, it's definitely his best album, I would say. And it's just at 40 minutes. Each song has a life of its own before it gets killed. And I've said this with my album review, with my list, and I'm going to say it again because I think that's a very important reason of why this album is so powerful, because you hear the recording space a lot in some of these songs. You hear you hear this background noise. You hear like waves kind of traveling in and out of the song. You hear a lot of feedback coming from things that you wouldn't hear in well-produced albums, because it's almost like Sufjan Stevens doesn't care. He just wants to get these songs out there, or he's capturing all of these moments from within the areas that he noticed them. Like he had this thought in on the beach, and that's why you hear the waves. He had this thought in his home. That's why it sounds like it's recorded in his attic. And it's very powerful because the songs either trail off like a last final breath, or they die immediately without notice because their life just got ended right there and then. Each song feels like it's been terminated, and it's the last piece of life, as if all of his thoughts have been terminated the by the thought that one day he's going to die. And that's a common theme on this album, and it's more powerful because it's not just a tribute to his mother's death. It's because he felt like he never had a true connection with his mother. He
Hmm.
feels like he feels like she was away a lot when he was young, or when she was there, she was either drunk, or her life was taken away by the drugs she needed to to help her schizophrenia. So she wasn't always there emotionally or mentally. So he never had a connection with his mom, and a lot of this is regret that he might have never tried, or when he did try, he didn't have a chance to. He clings onto a lot of figures that he loved, like swimming instructors, his stepfather Lowell, who actually helps his record label survive and keep strong. Like he's quite the figure within that label. So obviously got a strong connection with his stepfather. Um, with all of these people that he loves, he tries to cling to. Like he sees his mother in other people. He can't see his mother at all. He tries to envision her ghost. Like either his loved ones are too present or they're not present enough. There's never a middle. Sufjan tries to keep strong, or he tries to commit suicide by cutting himself, or he imagines crucifying himself. Like there's so much strong imagery that a lot of this is actually really, really, really difficult to listen to at times, especially like the way he uses his terrific wordplay to paint scenes like you're seeing his mother unconscious on the floor while the music changes from an upbeat banjo sound to like a death organ. It's really disturbing to witness sometimes, but I found myself putting this album on maybe like 5 times in a row and not getting tired of it. I would discover new things each and every time. It's beautiful writing. The orchestration, as minimal as it is so powerful. I find a lot of the time people think, "Oh, acoustic guitar playing can speak wonders," and it can, but a lot of the time it doesn't. But Sufjan has a knack for making a simple guitar arpeggio or a chord progression just sound like an entire orchestra without, adding layered guitars or anything. It's quite astounding what he could do with so little, and I'm glad that he's ventured down that path instead of having like his usual massive arrangements, despite the fact it was for such a sad reason. And because of that, because of what how much he accomplished was just so little and just the bare essence of human emotion. That's why Carrie and Lowell is my number one.
Do you feel like for this album, it's the story that made it number one, or the production, or it must be a combination of everything? But which one of those, like on the balancing scale, gave it that grand, this must be number one thing? The story, right?
Well, if this was a story that he conjured up, that would also be strong. But the fact that it was real, you could feel the real emotions
Yeah.
there. But when you first listen to this album and you don't dive straight into the lyrics, it's still a very, very strong album. But it's the moment that you look at each and every single line and what they represent, that's when you get knocked over by a bulldozer and it's like,
I
oh
think
my
people don't look
God.
at the lines too much like these days. People just like listening to it. They don't read the words or lyrics.
Well, if they didn't do that for this, then I highly advise that they
Yeah.
do, because this is some of the best writing I've heard of in years, and it's it's heart wrenching, and all of his efforts have gone mostly into the writing on this album. So if you haven't, please do that, because you're gonna get some of the most
The best,
emotionally written paintings you'll
yes,
ever see in recent music.
that is amazing. Wow. So with this list, that definitely proves that 2015 was a very, very good year for music.
Yes, and I'm actually working on my top performances on my top album or my top films. I finished my albums by now. Goodness, I'm working on those two, and those could actually be featured on our
Con-
Contra Zoom podcast
Podcast.
over with Dakota. Yes,
And I'll put a
so
link to that in the show notes.
absolutely, and I can't wait for that either. And I can't wait for these lists to be done because they take up a lot of time. But
And a lot of effort. But you listen to the stuff anyway, so you might as well do something with it.
yeah, it's still enjoyable for me, and I love being able to talk about this kind of stuff with people. So
And
I
express
hope it's
yourself.
enjoyable for
Yeah.
everybody else too. Yeah, I love saying why something is good and not just the fact that it's good. And I hope other people do the same.
It's always good. Thanks, Andreas. That was a great songs and albums list. And I'm sure 2016 will be really good as well.
Well, we're waiting on Kanye West, Radiohead.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, Radiohead.
yeah, the new PJ Harvey just got announced is going
Yes.
to come out early next year. So
Hopefully that
I'm
means a
excited.
tour.
Yes, please. And I am definitely going to that. No
Yes.
ifs, ands, or buts.
All right. Andreas, where can all of our listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Andreas Babs.
You can find myself on Twitter at Sean Chin. Please follow the show at Live in Limbo. Use the hashtag Capsule Podcast to join in on the conversation. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes. Give us 5 stars. Leave us some nice words in the review section. And as always, you can find the show notes at liveinlimbo.com/capsule. Take care.
Have a good one.